Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Adam Golov, Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I want to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. Next slide, please. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. Next slide, please. We serve a broad client base. Next slide, please. Spanning all industries. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Greg Fagan, who is the Sales Director for the Publishing and Financial Industries at DCL. Greg has over 25 years of experience in the publishing industry and has held key positions in production, editorial, and product development at major publishers and vendors such as Wiley, McGraw-Hill, Elsevier, Silverchair, and Alexander Street Press. Without further ado, welcome Greg.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks to everyone for joining today's webinar. So you're implementing a new content management system, or maybe you're upgrading an existing one. This means you're serious about organizing your content to make it more searchable and retrievable, and that you're probably keen to reuse and repurpose your content in multiple ways and to multiple outputs. That's good business practice, and it's something every organization that provides content should do. Delivering content to your internal and external users in the way that they want it is critical to your overall success. So now that you've decided to move forward with this new CMS, what's next? Any content management system requires content to be in some kind of structured format. In most industries, from publishing to financial services to aerospace, just to list a few examples, that structure will likely be some flavor of XML. But which XML schema should you use? Is one better or more appropriate than the others? Sure, you have a plan for new content that you'll be entering into your CMS, and you very likely have an authoring or data input tool designed to work with that system. But what about your legacy content? How many years worth of content do you have? How is it currently stored? Mostly paper, PDFs, spreadsheets? And what's your plan for integrating that into your CMS? Do you need to convert all of your content now, or can you prioritize and do it in stages? These are all important considerations, and hopefully you've thought about them before you've decided to implement a new content management system. Think about your business drivers for developing a CMS. Is the goal to publish to multiple channels, print, web, mobile apps, streaming audio and video, and to both internal and external users? Is it to reuse your content across your enterprise from a single source so that you can streamline content creation and avoid redundancies? Do you want to make updating easier? Or maybe you've seen the inefficiency of converting your content multiple times for different outputs. More than likely, your business drivers involve some combination or even all of these reasons. After all, the whole point of implementing a CMS is to get your content into a structure that provides greater control and flexibility. In addition to the financial challenges of converting content from one source to another multiple times, the content can't simply be moved from one design to another. Content for books is written to be read from beginning to end. This approach creates dependencies that make it difficult to use the same content in a different order or for a different purpose, such as a mobile app. For example, wording such as "on the previous page" isn't appropriate after conversion to digital reflowable text. Non-XML sources embed the formatting into the content. When an author applies a format in a source file, such as InDesign, the styling is embedded into the content. Because this styling isn't usually applicable to another deliverable, the formatting must be updated for each deliverable type. Tool-specific files lock your content into a dependency on that functionality, including output generation for that tool. All of these factors contribute to limiting the delivery possibilities for your content. So you need XML, but which schema? For the most flexibility across all content types, my recommendation would be Ditto, which, if you're not familiar with it, stands for Darwin Information Typing Architecture. Ditto is an open standard for creating, managing, and publishing modular content, which is what will be stored in your content management system. It supports the definition of new content types within a comprehensive ecosystem, and it's been increasingly adopted across a wide range of content disciplines and industries. So why Ditto? A few years ago, the common wisdom was that if you were developing narrative content, you should use DocBook, and if you were developing modular or topic-based content, you should use Ditto. That was true to an extent, but was always somewhat misleading in my view. Books can be written with Ditto, and modular content can be authored with DocBook. Ditto has really advanced in the last few years to the point where I think it's superior to DocBook, especially when implementing a content management system. Ditto can be published to all outputs, and it can be easily customized or specialized, to use the preferred terminology of Ditto advocates, to many different content types, such as educational, financial, and legal, just to name a few. That's important for the development of mobile content, apps, and training content. You can produce both HTML5 and EPUB with readily available open source tools that pair with Ditto. And while both have their strong points, Ditto is the more flexible schema of these two. It can do everything DocBook can, but the reverse isn't always true. For example, Ditto is better suited to granular storage of content that you see in most content management systems. Now, what about Xhtml? Although it's often thought of as one, Xhtml isn't a true schema. It's really a document styling format and thus not structured enough for a content management system. One of the essential functions of any content management system is that it should support most, if not all, output targets. And Ditto provides both a consistent XML structure and the flexibility of specialization to do that. How many of us foresaw the advent of all the current deliverable types we have now 5 years ago? Can you predict the quantity or variation of the deliverables your company will need to meet changing user needs in the next 5 years? If you separate your content from its delivery now, which is what a good CMS does, then you don't have to try to predict the future. Instead, you can future-proof your content so that it's ready to be transformed into whatever outputs your customers need. Now, it's one thing to do that with new content. It's a piece of cake, right? You simply set up templates and tools that integrate with your CMS. But what about your legacy content? That's a different challenge, so let's talk about that. Integrating your legacy content with a new content management system is no easy task, but with a logical, well-planned approach, it's not as daunting as it might seem. A phased approach makes a lot of sense, as it helps you to avoid costly mistakes, like realizing you've implemented a system that doesn't work before you get too far down the road. Prioritizing and converting your content in stages, doing some conversion and learning more about your content requirements before choosing a CMS, and running small pilot programs before getting locked in at a cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars are all good examples of a phased approach. With that in mind, let's discuss some relevant Ditto and CMS lessons in detail. DCL recently conducted a series of interviews with Ditto implementers at 12 companies. The intent of the study was to better understand the reality of live implementations versus the perceptions that exist in the industry. We promised anonymity so we could ensure the results would be representative of the group's actual findings. So why Ditto? The three most popular answers we received were reduce the need for composition. Now, composition is a rather publishing-centric term that refers to typesetting, but in this context, it can refer to any step that gets content or data ready for output. Content reuse and reduce translation costs. All three resulted in cost savings for these companies, decreased time to market, and improved internal efficiencies. This isn't surprising. We know from our own years of experience that having content in a structured format in a CMS has many benefits, with these three among the most cited. What were the business drivers? The top answer to this question was the ability for various teams to multi-purpose content to suit their particular requirements. Using chunks of content for multiple purposes dramatically reduced costs and improved overall reliability. I referred to multi-purposing in an earlier slide, and it's highly likely that it's at or near the top of any organization's list for moving to a structured content format within a CMS. One of the questions we posed was, how long did it take? Average implementation took 3 years. Some took only 2, others 5. Some respondents believe that implementation is an ongoing process that's never complete, and that's actually a good way to look at it in my view. Across the board, though, it took far longer than planned. This one came as a surprise to us, but there are ways to speed the process. After all, time is money. When did they choose their CMS? Half of the respondents selected their content management system at the beginning of the process. The other half followed after running various pilot programs. The companies that selected the CMS later started doing conversion and getting comfortable with their data first, then selected a content management system when they had a better understanding of their own data requirements. 2 of the companies had switched from their initial selection to another CMS during the testing phase, which highlights the value and wisdom of running small pilot programs before full implementation. Absent that testing, they might very well have continued down their respective paths with content management systems that weren't meeting their needs. That would have meant large sums of money spent for poorly implemented solutions, and it also would have resulted in walking papers for those decision makers in all likelihood. How was success measured? Once again, the ability to multi-purpose content was the #1 criterion for measuring success and return on investment. Some of the notable savings came from the improved ease and efficiency of the following: publishing content in multiple formats, developing training and help systems, customizing marketing and sales collateral, changing styling, layout, and design while maintaining the integrity of the copy, and producing HTML and ebooks since the content was standardized. We posed the question, how are you maximizing the benefits of content reuse? Only 2 of the 12 companies we interviewed were actively taking advantage of content reuse. Yes, we were surprised by this as well. Those 2 companies had decided up front to build an extensive rewriting phase into their implementation plan. While this additional phase extended the implementation time, the upfront planning was critical to the success of their overall project. The most common reasons for not implementing a reuse plan up front included projects being too large for anyone to manage or requiring too much rewriting. Notably, many also mentioned the drastic change that would be required for the content creators to move to the more modular writing mode involved with Ditto and to work more collaboratively and with more guidelines than they were typically accustomed to. Do you often need translation? 4 of the 12 companies were actively doing lots of translation. All 4 reported major savings. Even without content reuse, the savings of standardized data in terms of translation were vast and long-lasting. The 8 companies who didn't translate their data stated that it was a likely future endeavor, but that right now, even with globalization, they were able to get away with English alone. All of the respondents said that translation was definitely a future requirement. How did the conversion go overall? All 12 companies felt the conversion went relatively smoothly. However, many didn't do much conversion in their initial stages. Several had decided, to their later regret, to rewrite most materials from scratch, which simply took way too much time. These organizations ultimately left most of their legacy data unconverted until after the CMS implementation. Two companies initially thought that having their content creators do it themselves would be good training, but noted in retrospect that this was not a good idea. Did Ditto work out of the box? A major reason for attraction to Ditto was that it does work out of the box, at least for most. Others can expand its benefits by applying specializations when necessary. The companies we interviewed all agreed that for their materials, Ditto pretty much worked as advertised out of the box, and that standard composition software was for the most part suitable to their needs. Only 3 of the companies reported using specialization, and those were for minor items like customized document covers. Of course, these organizations were all working with technical documents of one kind or another, which are the type of documents Ditto was originally designed for. Other kinds of documents would likely require more specialization, although there are a number of emerging standardized specializations for different document types. So let's talk about the lessons learned. When asked what they would do differently, the most common response was more cleanup of the data before conversion. Many wanted smaller and simpler pilots, as well as more time to experiment. They felt they had focused too much on the complex outliers in their pilot and jumped into production too quickly without enough time to adjust for the lessons learned in the pilot. Underestimating the human factor was also a common note. Allowing more time for people to adapt to the new system and the philosophy of Ditto, as well as earlier training, were also prominent suggestions in hindsight. Finally, buy-in and support from upper management were viewed as critical by all respondents. Here's a table of common content pain points and how Ditto solves those problems, and I hope you can see this clearly. So, one of the issues is frequent content rework. Ditto enforces standardization. You have standardized authoring with using topic architecture, and the standardization is enforced. Slow, regular, and expensive branding updates. With Ditto, you make the changes in one place and then republish them to all places. Poor content usability and discoverability detract from the overall user experience. With Ditto, you have content types that are chunked into topics, so the navigation and searching take less time, and the clearer content is easier to follow. Information being locked in silos with isolated authoring teams. If you work for a large organization, you've probably encountered this problem somewhere along the way. With Ditto, standardized authoring and content reuse are encouraged. They encourage collaborative writing at the front end. Recreating content over and over wastes time and money. Ditto's reuse mechanisms support an average of 40% content reuse across documents. That's a really high percentage. You author once, you update once, and the changes take place everywhere, and you have guaranteed consistency. Ditto also overcomes translation expenses. It's faster and easier to manage. Different audiences seeing the same content, which may or may not be appropriate. In many cases, it's not. And with Ditto, the architecture allows you to create custom content for different audiences, but from the same source. And finally, difficult to publish to multiple formats. One of the beautiful things about Ditto is that it's incredibly flexible, so you can transform it into whatever format you may need. PDF, HTML5, EPUB, rich text format, even Excel and PowerPoint. So what are the benefits and drivers for content conversion, specifically when converting to a new content management system? Well-structured content has many benefits, with the most important being that it can increase revenue by decreasing time to market and enabling new product development. It also decreases expenses such as publishing and translation costs over time, which makes it a smart investment. Often, legacy content is more complex and difficult to manage than new content. In many cases, it was designed for one specific output, and not much thought was given to proper storage, retrieval, or reusability. There are also many different document types, formats, and levels of complexity, like heavy math and tabular material that were never meant for digital output. This is where the help of a trusted partner can be invaluable in helping you identify, categorize, and convert your content to a well-structured format. Your content should drive your business strategy. But you can't structure your content once and think your work is done. It's an ongoing process to keep up with industry standards, compliance, and constantly evolving outputs. Once the major work is done, though, the changes are much easier to manage, and your content is ready for delivery to any output. Content drives every aspect of your business, so make sure yours is ready to take you in the right direction. Structured content has many uses, with reuse and repurposing being the most important in my mind. Why is that? Because they often generate new revenue. The others are important too, and different industries have differing degrees of importance, but money's pretty important in all of them. When your content is structured at a granular level, you can assemble the different components into new products and new revenue sources. So the key considerations for conversion when implementing a content management system are as follows. You must plan thoroughly and then be prepared to adjust your plan once theory turns into practice. To quote General Dwight Eisenhower, no battle was ever won according to plan, but no battle was ever won without one. Prepare your teams and manage expectations. Try to anticipate problems before they occur. That's easier said than done sometimes, but it's the key to good project management. Implement your conversion and your CMS in phases. Pilot projects are a great way to discover and head off potential problems before you head too far down the wrong path. Establish multiple checkpoints and milestones and test your system often with real users and with real content. The people who will have to use the CMS every day are the people who will provide the most valuable feedback along the way. And finally, and we give this advice often, but it's always worth repeating, don't go it alone. For a project of this scope, you'll likely need outside expertise. Bringing in the right expertise is almost always more cost-effective than trying to manage every aspect of a large-scale project in-house. And that concludes the presentation section of this webinar. We're now going to open it up to your questions. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Greg. A very informative webinar. We have several questions that have come in, the first being, how does Ditto apply to financial services documents and data? Will it work with compliance documents, spreadsheets, etc.?
You know, I can cite an example without naming names. We're working with a large financial services company now, and for the most part they have vast internal resources and handle a lot of their content themselves, but they have this pretty large batch of legacy content that includes training content and SharePoint documents and Excel spreadsheets that they haven't done anything with. It sits in dozens of different directories, so they can't find it very easily. It's not searchable, it's not retrievable in any useful way. So what we're helping them do is put that into a format like Ditto, and so it'll have a structure, and it'll be easy for them to not only find it but to reuse it for other purposes once it's in a structured format. So Ditto is very applicable to that type of content, and that's what makes Ditto such a useful schema, is that financial services is one industry. It can be used for publishing. It can be used for pharmaceuticals. I mean, insurance. There's very few industries where Ditto wouldn't be a useful schema for your content.
Thank you, Greg. The next question has come in is creating content in Ditto difficult to learn?
Well, let's keep in mind that Ditto is a schema, it's not a tool. So much of that depends on the tool you choose to offer your content in Ditto. If you use a templated approach, it's not that hard, but it is different. So you need to adjust your mindset and approach to topic-based writing, because that's how Ditto is structured. Much as in journal publishing years ago, when it switched over from issue-based to article-by-article publishing, it was the same work. It was just the order was switched. The workflow had to be re-engineered to produce the same content, on a different schedule and in a different way. And that's kind of how Ditto works, is that you need to think about your content in terms of subjects and modules and author it that way.
Thank you, Greg. The next question has come in as a long one, so please bear with me. I have been an early adopter of Ditto. Our legacy content is in Ditto 1.1. How does the legacy content migration strategy if we wanted to update to Ditto 1.2 and 1.3 specification? New tagging, new content models, any suggestions?
Well, being that it's already in Ditto, that would be easier than taking it from, native, the formats it originally might have been in, like Excel or PDF or Word. Sure, the tags will have to be upgraded, but that's an easier migration than doing it from scratch. So you're halfway there with your content already in Ditto, even though it's 1.1. You've already done some of the work.
Thank you, Greg. The next question has come in is, will Ditto work with any CMS?
Yes, I can say that with total confidence. There's not, unless you have some really specialized content management system that you've designed yourself to work with a specific form of content, there's no off-the-shelf content management system or hybrid content management system that I've ever seen. And I've been involved with a fair amount of development of content management systems that would work with Ditto. Ditto is really flexible, and if you have the right type of content that lends itself to Ditto, then it's a really great schema to use.
Great, thank you, Greg. The last question that's come in is, how costly is it to move to Ditto?
Well, think about it in the context we're talking about it. You're talking about investing in a new content management system or upgrading the one that you have, and you've already expressed a willingness to invest in that and to convert your legacy content and to commit to some form of XML. So, let's assume that you've already decided that you're going to be investing a pretty big chunk of money. None of those key initiatives that I just mentioned should be done on the cheap. You've made a judgment that they're critical to your business, so you want to make sure you do them right. That being said, you wouldn't be investing the money and resources if you weren't expecting a solid return on those investments. So can it be costly? Yeah, sure it can. But you need to do your homework and see if it's worth doing. More often than not, it will be.
Well, thank you, Greg, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. This concludes today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of today's webinar from the webinar archive section of our website located www.dclab.com. Our next webinar will be tomorrow, Wednesday, November 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Converting and Transforming Technical Graphics, being presented by Don Larson of Larson Software Technology and David Manick of Visual Sight LLC. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.